in order to really learn the tools, you have to do something you really care about, because that will force you into figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
If you're just like, I'm doing a test, yeah, you might have some fun and it might lead to something, who knows, but like, it doesn't really make you push to that next level,
Just to introduce myself, Aryeh Sternberg. I'm one of the co-founders of the Omni International AI Film Festival, and we hold the film and the story as the most important part of everything that we do. And so when we select the films, we have a jury that comes in. In this case, we had Alex Proyas, film director, Clayton Jacobson, also an Australian film director, and then some other people with us. A heavy VFX guy named Yan Chen, and then Thea Baldwin, who's from the curation side of work. And we really just want to explore what can be done in this new medium, and what people are doing with it. And I came across Hayden because we had 3,800 films. So
I can't believe it. That's fucking insane.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, seeing yours rock up with an hour plus, and it's like, okay, we have a good handful, and this time, surprisingly, there were some decent feature-length films. Like, it wasn't just one or two. There was a number, but I think for me, what stood out when I first saw it was just the consistency of a character, the pace, the story. Just it carried through, and in the early days of AI, which is generative filmmaking, which isn't that long ago. Just keeping consistency, lip syncing, everything so hard. And I think some of the new tools are there, and we'll get into it more. But, for me, just having a conversation with the creators, because I'm a bit of a creator myself, just to understand how, how you get through it,
Yeah, no, that's, first of all, I was like so thrilled to have you guys pick the film, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind, because basically I made the film in the first place to just kind of test the limits of what I could do with it. I did a couple shorts last year that I put out to a few festivals and, shorts, and, they were fulfilling to make, but like, I just felt like, I haven't really done a deep dive. And so in February, I knew I had I wasn't getting my usual gigs. So I was like, I have some time now. Why don't I utilize that time to really dive into the tools again, So, and I will also say caveat, I also do a lot of documentary films, like, normal documentary films.
Okay. And
we've done a film with George Monbiot. He's a writer for The Guardian, on kind of the history of neoliberalism, and we did the interview like pretty much the same month as ChatGPT came out. Okay. So just for timing sense. And so I put a bunch of like AI stuff in that film, mostly like early Mid-Journey stills. It just kind of had this like, we almost like embraced the slop aesthetic because it represented this like dystopian capitalist kind of look, So, and we got such blowback for doing that I was like, whoa, it kind of like really like splashed a lot of cold water on AI for me for a while. And I was like, I need to take a break and like reevaluate this. And, so Hayden was really like, I was like, screw it. I'm going back in. And, as you know, with the AI world, it's like, you just have to like dip your head in the slipstream of what's happening and figure out, like what's the best tool to use and stuff. So I initially, I'm really interested in, and I think my next film I'm going to really explore is in taking like some 19th or 18th century piece of like literature and adapting it, like probably not Shakespeare, but I don't know, something, a classic, to just see if it can be done, as a challenge. And it's something that I love, like to kind of like see if to keep like the great English parts of the English language, keep it alive in a new format, I guess is the way I would put it. So initially, to make a long story short, I was trying to do a short story, D.H. Lawrence short story, and there was just a lot of like weird accents, and like 5 minutes into the edit, I was like, this is just like way too hard, like,
yeah.
What I realized was like, but in that process, I realized it's really good at doing like recreation kind of footage, a little dialogue. So I was like, why don't you do like kind of a voice of God narration? And I used to read a lot of like artist memoirs when I was in film school and stuff. So I started doing some research on that, and then this was all with Gemini, and Gemini, gave me like 6 or 7 different artists, and I was like, nah. And so then it brought up this artist Hayden, who I'd never heard of before. Okay. So, and then I started like getting into it. I was like, oh, this guy's incredible. Like his story was like, it was like exactly what I was looking for. So I bought his autobiography. I read some of it. I looked at it online. I fed the whole. What was interesting about him is, and we say it in the film, he wrote 27 volumes of journals. Okay.
Yeah.
And he wrote his own autobiography up till 1824, and then when he died, some guy finished it. And so I had all this material, and so I found that if you go, as it's like if you go and you're like, write me a feature-length script, like it's not going to do that, right? So you have to really like get it down into small chunks, and I built it like beat by beat, So I first created a 5-act structure, and then I went in and I created, I think, a 3-act structure within each act, and like built it out that way. And then I started building the narration. It took a little time to find the right voice that had enough like emotion, but wasn't, that like kind of fit the character and all that.
What did you use for the voice?
11 Labs.
Yeah.
I still find that to be the best. I mean, it's weird. Yeah. It's like, I'll get into what I'm doing now in a second.
Yeah, totally. But, please continue. Yeah. So
then, I'd been used Runway in the past, so I was using Runway for image stuff, and like, it was like good, but I wasn't like, I didn't feel like I was on the cutting edge. There was a lot of like seed dance talk, but it wasn't out yet. This is February, right? So I was like, and I was really testing every model. I was like, checking everything out. And so finally I ended up on Kling.
I thought so.
And I was like, okay, this looks a little better, and it was like, gave me 15 seconds, which was a big deal. This extra 5 seconds. And then while I was making the film, Kling Omni came out, like in the middle of me making it. I was like, whoa, this is like major step forward here, So I had to go back and change some stuff because it just didn't look as good and character consistent as the later stuff, which I find every film I make, it's like, as you're doing it, the stuff improves. You're like, oh my God, the beginning, or you get better at it. And so then and so I got to the point where I was like, I was in a groove, and then I got a little freaked out. I was like, am I really getting this guy's like voice from his journals? So I rewrote the script, and I used only actual entries from his journals. And Gemini didn't like that at all. It was like, why are you doing it? Actually, it was the only time it like pushed back. It's like, I'm creating this great like narration for you. I'm capturing his voice, like, and I was like, well, I want the authentic thing. And then I did that for a while, and then I realized, that's not working as well. I think Gemini was right, So it's kind of a hybrid of actual stuff and, Gemini kind of using the voice of Hayden to write stuff out. And And like the moment when it's called like the immortal dinner in his journal, when he has Keats and Wordsworth and Charles Lamb over at his house, and I was like, that's actually what he wrote down. I was like, this is a very famous moment in history. Virginia Woolf was really influenced by that moment. Aldous Huxley like wrote a book about it, and so I was like, this is a kind of a cool moment to capture actually what he said. So it's really a hybrid of that, and then after about an act, I was like, oh, this is really working. I like this. I was into it. And then I just worked like day and night on it because I knew I only had a limited amount of time, and I just banged through it,
Yeah.
And I had it all laid out. It's just like really just creating imagery for it. As you know, it can get really sticky with certain things, with like kids and like there are certain things I ran into. But the real fun was like the artwork is actually his artwork. It's actually those are his paintings. And like when he goes and looks, at, and I learned a lot about that period of art history by working on it. This Elgin Marble moment was actually a big moment where, for a lot of these artists, they had never really seen Greek art before from that period. And it was a big revelation for a lot of people. And so that moment, those are the actual pieces that they probably saw, and that was really exciting. Wow, this is like authentic in this new way, that you wouldn't be able to even get in a Hollywood film. And same way with creating the characters. I felt like Keats was like really like Keats, It was weird. It was a weird thing. Anyway, so I just kind of really cranked through it, and then my dad's a history professor, so I was showing him cuts, and like he had some really good comments about the last bit. So I really reworked the ending with the Tom Thumb thing, which I thought was an incredible story. Like it's like the P.T. Barnum. That's really like the birth of modern entertainment, and it's this moment where he like basically commits suicide because everyone goes to see Tom Thumb and not his last art show. Yeah. And what an incredible moment in art history. And so that was really, I knew I was building up to this pretty cool moment, which I was like getting towards. And the Tom Thumb thing was a nightmare because he was a kid, kind of, and like wouldn't let me generate it. Now we're Sorry, I've been talking a lot, but
no. It's awesome, and I think what's critical is, and what I've loved hearing right now is, and my next question is really around your experience and background and what led you into using the generative tools, but also your background as a filmmaker, and as a in the documentary space. And I think what we come across is everyone can prompt Will Smith eating spaghetti, right? But like, what's the story? And really understanding how to build a film, how to craft it and put it together, and break it down to acts, and everything that goes into filmmaking. And the conversation that we have with filmmakers here who talk to us and say, you're replacing us, like, actually you're way ahead of the curve, and you should just jump in and adopt the tools. They're tools, right? Yeah.
It's
a
little bit of a mind shift, because it's like, I mean, listen, for me, I feel like my whole life I've been like waiting for this to happen, and I'm working on things I never dreamed I would be working on. But, I did a lot of like found footage films back in like early 2000s, late 90s, and
interesting.
I did lots of weird experimental music videos. I did films where I would like walk around New York City and people would throw out their old videotapes, and I would just like dumpster dive and find weird videos and like make collage out of it. And now it's like I can make my own footage, right? Like it was a natural extension of how I was used to working already, in a way. And it's and I also found it was like, that, and I'm sure we've all had this moment with AI where you're like, it's like, oh my God, this is like a blank canvas. I can do whatever I want. Now it's on you. You're like, what are you going to do with this tool? and that's scary. It's a scary thing because all of us have this like story, like, oh, I'll be a filmmaker someday. Well, go ahead. You can. What's stopping
Exactly.
you? You know?
Just go. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest points that people make is that, suddenly everyone's making films. And like, look, 90% of the films that we see that really just stand out, people have some filmmaking background. And there are a few that come in, but like having that critical eye to cut, and just knowing that like something looks good, but it doesn't fit, and you got to be able to say, I can't, as much as I love it, I've got to cut that out. Oh, yeah. And that's such a hard
biggest
decision to make.
People make is cutting their babies,
Yeah.
It's like, and I find that in some ways I wouldn't have been able to make the film with another person, you know what I mean? Because it's just, I do video editing mostly for a living, to just pay the bills, and like, you're doing other people's visions and stuff, but you do build a voice of like trusting yourself and all these like hundreds of decisions you're making, and so I think being an editor definitely allows you to be much quicker with making a film, because if you're a director, well, you can generate stuff, but you can't really put it together, right? It's all about how do you put stuff together, and in the end, right? And lay music in, and timing, and pacing, and all that stuff, right?
Can I ask about the music? Because, it uses an AI composed score alongside, the AI generated imagery. How do you direct the music? I mean, how did you keep that consistent and create that? And I'm assuming you use something like Suno or Udio, but yeah.
I did, and initially we work with this awesome composer a lot on my docs named Landon Knobloch, and so I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, Landon, I wanted to get like kind of like, so I not to sound pretentious, but I wanted to get this like Schubert score thing and I was like, could you like give me like the piano accompaniment to?" And he was like, yeah, but he didn't have the time to do it. So I was like, All right, I got to do this myself. So I kind of went in with those prompts, and it wasn't, I didn't, I often feel like music is way overscored in films, like, it's almost like they're like, often it's like, okay, now it's time to feel something, like that's the way it hits me often. And so, I have this dream of re-editing films and pulling music out of films, and I think you could improve a lot of films that way. And so I just basically created a score that kind of fit the period and wasn't too invasive. I just wanted it to be to also help me kind of like just like stick scenes together, make things flow better. I was more of like just getting a flow versus like, there are a couple moments where it really works dramatically, but I didn't feel like it needed it. I felt like the material was, dramatic enough, and I wanted that stuff to really shine in the film.
Totally.
And I got to a point where I was like, I did the whole thing in a month, and then I was like,
wow.
I was like, all right, I don't really have time to work on this anymore, so I guess it's done. Yep. And then I went on Film Freeway, and I was like, all right, who takes AI films? And it's a very limited thing, which is kind of good, in a weird way. Like I've had films everywhere, top festivals and all that. I've done, so I'm not like, I wasn't really like trying to get into anything big. I was just curious about what the AI film world is like. It's a whole new thing. And as you know, it's a wild west, of like scam artists and monthly festival. And like, I wasn't used to any of that. So it took me like a month to figure out what the hell was going on. But I did right away. I was like, holy shit, I'm getting into everything. I started winning some awards. I was like, oh, this is crazy. Maybe I hit the right moment. And I think I did because I did it so quickly, because I used Omni. I think my film was a few months ahead, just look wise, of a lot of other films. I think this time next year, everyone will have been using Seed Dance, and the quality will just look better and feel better. my goal right now is to really figure out how to do dialogue well. That's what I think that, just from an interest standpoint, to pull off something dramatic where people forget it's AI like that. That's my goal,
Absolutely. If you have a chance, the winner of Hyperphantasia, which is the Omni 1.5. So we have the major festivals that we run every 6 months, just because of the speed at which the technology is changing and everything. You have to. And the winner of Hyperphantasia, his film was named A Face Only a Mother Could Love. I highly recommend looking that up. I can send the link after. But what we saw, we did a smaller festival in Shanghai called Omni Emotion, which is really calling for films that touched on films that we evoke emotion from the viewer. And there was one entry called The Bullfighter, which was a dinner of some friends having a conversation around a dinner table. It was in Spanish. And one person said, "Well, I'm going to be a bullfighter," and then the friends sort of like reacting to that.
Yeah,
it was incredible because it had what you just described, and that evoked that emotional, both the verbal and nonverbal communication in dialogue, and it was all about dialogue, and it was incredible. But this time, the number of films that came through that just we had to look like clearly they were generative in nature, but it was like they really captured it, and it wasn't voiceover. It was like generative dialogue. So I guess I have a two-part question. One is, now we've got, I think, CDance 2.5, which can output, I think, 1:05 or something like that in one shot in 4K. And
is that actually available yet somewhere? I've seen that there, like some people have posted some.
Yeah, some influencers have it, but it's definitely up and about. But the models are getting there, and Happy Horse I think does definitely 15 seconds, not 30 seconds. And so like that question around if you can output a minute and you're not controlling anything, is 100% generative, where do you feel like that's a loss of control? And do you feel like as a creator and a director, how much control do you need in that? Yeah.
I've thought of like kind of where things are at right now. I'm like, I could do this for the rest of my life and be happy with the way things are now, maybe in a few years. You're right. It's like, it's weird. It's right now I'm working on a sci-fi film. I'm sure you get a lot of sci-fi stuff.
Fantastic. You got to enter it. Yeah.
This guy I know, I was like, hey, look, obviously getting into Omni gave me a lot of confidence. So I reached out to some people. I was like, hey, look, I won this award. Look what I can do. Are you interested in doing a film? So this one guy who I edited his musical like 4 years ago, he's like, actually, I wrote these sci-fi scripts that, I never thought I would do. And I was like, well, let's play around with that. Let's see. So the last 4 weeks I've been, kind of building it. He gave me like 10 pages. So, and I was like, I don't even care what the hell the script is. I just want to see if I can do it, can I do the dialogue and stuff. So, and it was so weird because I went back in to try to do my workflow that I did with Hayden. And like, I used actually a lot of Google Flow as well. And Google Flow is totally different, and I couldn't get it to do the things I want. I was like, this sucks. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'm using Kling. And then Kling felt very limiting all of a sudden. So I was like, all right, let me try Higgsfield. So I went into Higgsfield. I started doing Seed Dance, and I was like, okay, this is great. And then still with the dialogue, I couldn't get it. And I use a lot of HeyGen for the dialogue just because I have more control. And you can do really long takes. You can do 3 minutes, of dialogue. It looks a little stilted, but it does animate the backgrounds, and it does a lot of good emotional stuff. And it's definitely like very cost effective. You pay. I've never hit a limit there, and it's like $19 a month or something. With Higgsfield, you're like, holy shit, I could blow through $300 a day. That's easy. So I do have a little bit of a budget. So then I started I noticed with Sea Dance that it does do dialogue really well, but it's hard to kind of control it.
Yeah.
So on a couple scenes, I just threw a lot of compute at it, or a lot of tokens or whatever, credits. And then basically I just treated it like they were takes, you know, from a film shoot. And then I just like pieced together the takes from it. And, you know, I don't know. I kind of like was selling the guy. I was like, I think I can do this, you know, and it's so much better than I thought I could ever do. You know, just in the last few weeks, I was like doing people jumping off bridges and people dying and like all this, you know, I was like, whoa, this is bizarre, you know? I've been having a lot of fun this last month again, like just realizing like, okay, what I can take on is much greater than what I thought, you know.
We're gonna have we're almost out of time, so I just want to let you know that we're gonna open entries for a Youth AI Film Festival that we're doing a partnership with Ningbo University in China. So look out for that one. My last question is, what would you tell, you know, people starting getting into this? Just what would be your direction if they want to, you know, try to make a film?
Yeah. I'd say this no matter what film you make, is like, in order to really learn the tools, you have to do something you really care about, because that will force you into figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
If you're just like, I'm doing a test, you know, you might have some fun and it might lead to something, who knows, but like, it doesn't really make you push to that next level, you know, like, last week I was ready to throw stuff against the wall because I couldn't figure stuff out, you know, and then I had like the breakthrough. I was like, oh, it's the combination of Sea Dance and Hayden. It gets me there for now. You know, I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but you know, that's generally the way I feel about it, you know, and I also feel like, you know, and I like what you said at the outset of this conversation, that it's really about, you know, the story and the character. I'm definitely like a very much of a character person as far as in creation. I feel like if you have a good character, you can almost tell any story. People will watch it, you know. If it's engaging, it's engaging, you know. And so you have to also entertain yourself. Like, you have to do something that you're like, oh wow, you know, I didn't expect that to happen while you're creating stuff, and then your viewer will have that same experience. If you're trying to create something where you're like, I'm doing this because I think if I do this, then they will, you know, like, then you're already kind of going off track, you know?
Absolutely.
So it can still work, but, you know.
Well, Lucas, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to meet you. And, you know, we do have lots of different activities going on. I think we'll definitely reach out because we've got other aspects of Omni that we're working on, but this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate your contribution. I mean, just keep making. And
again, thank you so much, Arya. It gave me so much confidence to like push to the next level, and you know, that was a real gift for me as an artist. And keep me in the loop. I'd love to participate. I love what you guys are doing, and you know, and you know, keep me abreast on cool stuff that's going on, and I'll send you things that are interesting and or I think are interesting, and we'll go from there. But let's keep in touch for sure.
Thank you, Lucas. We'll talk to you soon. Well.